industry, Wyoming has a tendency to be at the forefront of a lot of new things. For example, Wyoming invented the LLC, which
Really?
a lot of people don't even know that. Wyoming
Oh,
invented the LLC and other states followed.
well,
So Wyoming has some really, really fantastic LLC laws. So we actually do a lot of business formations in Wyoming because the LLC laws are so fantastic in Wyoming. They're some of the best in the country. A lot of people think Delaware,
yeah.
Nevada, some other states, but and those states are good, but Wyoming has got some really fascinating and really innovative laws. Well, Wyoming has done the same thing with cryptocurrency, and they've taken a look at what is what they see as being kind of next generation with currency and business and banking, and they've really been they've really been creative, innovative, um, surrounding the legislation to allow this type of business and banking to move forward. It's been really fascinating to watch. There is a legislative task force that's been working for a couple of years now in Wyoming on advising the legislature, putting together proposed legislation, really working with the industry on cryptocurrency, and specifically what needs to happen from a legal standpoint, from a statutory standpoint, to allow this type of business to move forward. And they've just done a phenomenal job. They've opened the doors for huge amounts of new business, and it's been really great. It's been, I mean, I think there's a lot of new things happening, and it probably would be good if you want to dive deeper into what's going on with the cryptocurrency and how it's impacting business specific. I would recommend that you get David Pope on your Zoom, your podcasts or video calls, because he's on that task force. He's on that committee that has been working very hard at promoting cryptocurrency and legislation changes in the law. He's at the forefront of it. He is a CPA by trade. He owns a CPA firm, a really large CPA firm. But he's someone that I talk to regularly about what's going on in Wyoming. Some interesting things that have been happening is some legislation that was passed, and I was specifically following on the energy and natural resources side, is Bitcoin mining and how that impacts utilities and energy companies, what the cost of that energy is and how is that handled, because that's a very interesting piece to me. But in addition to that, the other interesting pieces to me are the number of businesses that we are forming in Wyoming who are in this technology space, this cryptocurrency space. It's really been very fascinating with the types of new opportunities that have been created in Wyoming.
So if you're just to position yourself as an attorney with skills in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
Are you just holding, like, what's the value add? Is it lobbying? Is it familiarity with regulations around banking? Yes.
Banking, yes. So
Like, what's
there's
an example? Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, oh yeah. Is it like, what's it like? John's cattle farm has a client that wants to pay them for their quarter beef in Bitcoin. Is that
Mhm.
the scenario? That's like 5 years down the road, or where? Like, what's the scenario?
So it's actually much broader than that. That's just a that's just a payment. That's just a payment from one cryptocurrency account to another cryptocurrency account.
Yeah,
That's similar to a credit card transaction,
yeah,
right? But it's being done through blockchain, not through the credit card
yeah.
or system, right? So that's more of a peer-to-peer payment through blockchain, using blockchain as the payment method rather than a traditional banking method.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, so it's interesting. I actually did a whole presentation on blockchain that I've got. If you're interested, we could maybe dive into that at another time. There's a lot to it. But what blockchain essentially is it's a technology of building blocks of information. And I'm being very, very simplistic here. There's a lot more layers of complication, but in its most simplistic, you could think of it as Legos, right? Anyone who's got kids or not, and everybody knows Legos. It's a system of building information blocks, electronic information blocks, block by block. And each of those blocks is locked. And everybody who puts information in that has the key to that information. And they can obtain that information and get it out. When you're looking at cryptocurrency, you're looking at specifically blockchain technology. And when you're looking at cryptocurrency mining, like Bitcoin and some of those others examples, you're looking at the blockchain technology itself. So when we're talking about the legal space and what opportunities there are in legal,
Yeah, this is what I don't get. This is where
right. Yeah, because blockchain, cryptocurrency, all of those things are very technology heavy. So when we talk about the legal space, we're looking at the regulations. We're looking at banking regulations, SEC. You're looking at local regulations. A lot of states don't have regulations yet. They're really struggling to try to keep up with what may need to come, may need to be looked at. Wyoming said, we're not going to wait and see what somebody else is going to do. We're actually going to create the laws that are going to make this happen. Yep. So that's what Wyoming did. Wyoming has made the laws that allow for blockchain technology to occur in a regulatory space, including banking. Banking is the big one. Banking, you're looking at a lot of electronic legislation related to electronic transfers and electronic, technology. I think last year, and I've got a list. If I would have known you wanted to dive this deep, I would have pulled up some of this information, because I have a whole presentation that I've done on the laws that have been created in Wyoming that allow this to move forward.
And that's my fault, but I just want the complete dummy version of. Yeah. And this is great. This is great so far. So let me okay. So Wyoming has been pioneering the regulations, the laws, yada yada yada, because it's all digital. So who are the who's your client in this case, and what's their problem that you're going to help them solve?
So I'll give you a couple examples. One is this really, really fascinating company. I like to follow what they're doing. They are using blockchain technology in the food chain. This is one that I am really fascinated with personally, on a personal level. So there's a cattle company in Wyoming. All of their cattle are tagged electronically. You've seen pictures of cattle online. They've got a tag in their ear usually. Yeah. So that way everybody knows whose cow that belongs to. You've also got, branding. The traditional is branding the cattle. Yeah. A lot of people still do that. What we're seeing now in blockchain is we're seeing some tagging. We're seeing some really creative tagging that allow for a tracking device, an electronic tracking device for each cow, each beef. And that piece of technology, that chip, tracks where the cows are at any one time. And if you know Wyoming, you understand that there's a lot of open grazing on, there's huge open lands in Wyoming. So that does two things. It helps so that you know where the cattle are located at all times. Because you could be on thousands of acres of land, and you've got to go round up your cattle at some point. So it allows you to know where your cattle are. It allows you to know the health of the cattle. It can monitor their health, what they're eating, what what their digestive system is doing. It can monitor all kinds of information, and all of that pieces of information are building a block on this blockchain. So it's building an piece of information about that one cow, how that cow is growing, its health, all of those things, all those pieces of information.
Got it.
And then track that cow then to the feedlot, or to a point where it's processed into beef. All of that information continues to build in the blockchain on that one piece, on that one cow. That information can be then shared with the grocery store. The grocery store or the supplier who now takes that beef can say, okay, this cattle, we know for people who are interested in this market, this was all grass-fed, no chemicals, no hormones. You can trace that. Now you can prove it, because you've got this technology of blockchain that has been built along the system. It can track how long it was at the processing plant, how long it sat in the freezer, the process from the processor out to the supply chain, to the grocery stores. It can track, this system then tracks this piece of beef from beginning to end user, which can give a lot of information to the end user about the quality of their food. We're also seeing it in the produce. There's a company that's doing this for their produce. So you can trace your lettuce. So that where this really is fascinating is if there's a salmonella outbreak in lettuce, well, then they can track, instead of a recall on all lettuce, they can track that down to exactly where that came from, what shipment that was in, they can trace that much, much better. So you can look at it from that kind of perspective. That's just one example of how it's being used. I mean, there's thousands of examples.
Yeah.
Blockchain and cryptocurrency are being used in hundreds of other ways across the country and across the world. We're seeing it used in energy. We're seeing it used in some microgrid situations where there's some experiments as to solar being used on rooftops and how much solar energy is being taken in and stored into an individual home's battery system that can be dispersed then amongst a smaller community, how much energy is used by each user. There's an exchange of cryptocurrency for that energy on that grid. There's just all kinds of examples of how this is being used. And the types of law that are being really created around this are almost changing constantly. Because
but like, okay, so I'm with you so far. I see the application, or like the cow application or the beef application is great. I'm with you. And even I can see it, just the versatility of the technology. But then, like, walk me through the beef company. How do they need a lawyer for this? Like, don't they just contact the chip company and then it's all like technology?
So you kind of have to think of it in terms of a company. It's just a company, right? It's just a company that's doing business in this way rather than maybe in another way, but it's just business. So you still need all of your typical legal work. You've got contracts. You've got in some cases we're seeing smart contracts, which is a totally different ballgame. Smart contracts are built in blockchain. There are companies like IBM and some other companies that actually have been building up platforms for smart contracts on that blockchain technology. So you're still going to have your contracts, you're still going to have negotiations, you're still going to have breaches of contract, all of your typical issues that might come up in business, right? Those are all still there.
Got it.
So that doesn't change. You still have your banking issues and that kind of thing. Where I think the new opportunities are coming up are in the actual formation. How do we comply with the regulations surrounding Bitcoin and blockchain and banking? Those are the new legal industries that I think are growing up and kind of, we're seeing those bloom in this kind of regulatory environment. You're
Got it.
still going to have your traditional law, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It really, that is a very good way to explain that entire, for like a complete, for 15 minutes. That's fantastic. So,
And I feel like it's a huge oversimplification. If you wanted to take a deeper dive into this, we can do that at maybe at another time, and I can actually pull up some of my presentation, and we could actually go into some of the new laws that have been formed and what we're seeing on that.
yeah, super fascinating. So, the move as a lawyer then is to position yourself as someone who understands blockchain enough to know that it's useful and valuable and find it interesting, but really you're just offering yourself up as a technician of the law, like in the ways that you said, breach of contract, employees, standard stuff. It's just a company. Instead of selling widgets or carrots, now they're using Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or blockchain to, in some way, shape, or form. And you just have a conversational ability with that, but you're really just a lawyer pulling the same basic levers that you would for a daycare or a swimming pool.
Well, it helps to have some knowledge and understanding of these new laws, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to advise your client properly,
Yep.
because they are, yes, it's there's a traditional business law issues that come up. However, there's unique aspects of those that a lawyer will need to understand. And if you're working specifically in Wyoming or any state that is adopting, and other states are looking at adopting some of these laws now. So Wyoming's been kind of leading, the forefront of this, but other states are looking at it as well, and we're seeing some movement in other states. So definitely, if you want to be in this space, the best thing a lawyer can do is get involved at the legislative level, be involved at the ground floor. That's
Why do
the
you why
best
do you
way,
say that? Because why do you say that?
because then you know this better than anybody else. You've been involved in the process, you can speak intelligently, you understand it. I mean, you can always come in and learn it after the fact, but if you want to be a lawyer that is, on the front lines of new law, the best way to do that, and it doesn't matter what kind of law you're dealing with, if you're dealing with new law in, I don't, who knows what it is. I mean, any new law,
Yeah.
new employment law, if there's a big change that comes out in employment law, get involved at the ground floor, learn it,
Sure.
follow it, be involved. That's how you build your knowledge base, first of all, because you know the ins and outs of the whys, the hows, what it says. You can speak very intelligently of it, but it also gives you a platform and an opportunity to grow your client base at the same time, because you're going to have potential clients who are involved in you've got potential clients who are pushing this legislation for a reason. They're going to be looking for attorneys and team members who really get it and understand the law. So if you're in the middle of it, it's a great way to grow your business as a lawyer. Be involved.
So what is your prediction about, I mean, you mentioned solar in the same breath as you were talking about blockchain. So I'm assuming the marriage between blockchain familiarity on one hand and solar as an energy source on the other is murderous. Are you putting more and more eggs in the blockchain cryptocurrency basket, or would you advise that?
As an attorney,
Yeah.
I think it's always good to know and understand. So if you're a business attorney, for example, and you don't learn blockchain, you don't learn smart contracts, you're not learning, some of these issues that are going to come up, I think in the future, it will limit you to a traditional type of representation.
Yep.
Which is fine, because there's going to be a lot of businesses that just maintain a traditional type of structure.
Yep.
If you are an attorney like you or me, I want to stay current with everything that's going on,
Yeah.
so that I can best represent my clients.
Yeah.
I don't want to limit what I can do to represent my business clients and the companies that we work with.
Have you thought about, I have to interrupt you, otherwise I'll just forget what I'm going to say. Have you thought about, you're licensed in Wyoming and Colorado, correct?
Yep.
But this is clearly a global issue. So have you thought about positioning yourself as somebody who can take a client in New Orleans, in Austin, Texas? How do you cross that bridge? Because it seems so like you don't have to represent them in court, but if they have a question about like, hey, blah 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 blah, like I'm in Florida and I know Wyoming is the pioneer, like how do we, you can charge them for that. Like that's a client.
So this brings up a very big ethics issue, and I'm a huge stickler with the ethics rules. The last thing I want to do is to get in trouble for violating an ethical rule. As lawyers, we have our license. If we have our license, we're not lawyers. So I think as lawyers, we've got to be very, very careful to make sure that we understand the rules of the jurisdictions that we're licensed in and the rules of the jurisdictions we're not licensed in. So if you're not licensed in a jurisdiction where a client has come to you, you've got to look very, very closely at that to see if you're going to violate the rules of practicing without a license or not. And this issue has come up actually quite a bit. I've seen in this blockchain space. Now, I see this a lot because we get a lot of, so because Wyoming, I'm going to kind of back up a little bit because I think this will help the answer. Because Wyoming created the LLC. Wyoming set themselves up as a very business-friendly state. They don't have corporate taxes, business tax. They don't have income tax. They have some incredibly friendly business laws. So what Wyoming did is set themselves up to be a home state, essentially, for businesses to form and have their companies location in Wyoming. So we end up having clients call us from all over the country to form their businesses in Wyoming.
Yeah.
And to help them with their Wyoming representation related to their business.
Yep.
Now, if a company is operating, say, in Florida, but their business is registered in Wyoming,
Yep.
then there's some crossover. Mm-hmm. Now, all of a sudden, you've got to look at, okay, what am I doing? Am I doing, is it work related to the Wyoming jurisdiction or the Florida jurisdiction? You have to know that distinction. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't know that distinction, you can get into trouble. And you've got to be incredibly careful about that. I've seen attorneys get into trouble with that. And so, we've even had issues where lawyers are representing, say, and this is a purely hypothetical example, but say there's a company in Florida that has registered their business in Wyoming, but their main operations are in Florida. So they have a local Florida attorney, for example, pure hypothetical, that is handling all their local Florida related legal work. Mm-hmm. Well, something comes up that's business related that actually ties back to the Wyoming jurisdiction, and that Florida attorney is trying to do that work. All of a sudden, have they crossed into Wyoming jurisdiction, and are they practicing without a license in Wyoming? We have seen that issue come up. We have seen attorneys get into trouble for that exact thing. And on the vice versa, Wyoming attorneys doing work in another state because they're like the business is registered in Wyoming. So you have to be very, very careful about that issue. And the only thing I can say is because every state laws are so different, and all the rules of professional conduct related to practicing without a license are different. Mm-hmm. So you've just got to know the rules cold. I mean, you just can't assume that it's safe to do it. You just have to know the rule.
So are you tempted to grow the number of states you're licensed to practice in?
So we actually have contract attorneys as local counsel in a lot of states. And because I am not willing to, I'm not willing to risk my license or our firm for, working in a jurisdiction that I'm not licensed in or one of my attorneys isn't licensed in. And so we do have contract attorneys in a lot of different states. But we do a lot of work. You'd be amazed at the work that we get in Wyoming for the Wyoming jurisdiction, specifically related to businesses. When Wyoming first started passing all these new laws, we were getting calls all the time to form new technology companies that want to be registered and to do business in Wyoming. And it's really fascinating, the kind of companies that we've worked with, and the types of work that has presented itself because of this type of law and this innovation that's happening in Wyoming.
Hmm. So, what percent of your brain is occupied by businesses engaged with cryptocurrency or blockchain in some way, shape, or form?
Um,
Like, I'm
I,
trying to get a sense of how many eggs of your basket are are blockchain eggs.
actually, I don't know off the top of my head. Um, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to go look in our system for our records. I don't know off the top of my head.
Do you? Okay.
But I can tell you, if you're looking, so if you're looking, or other attorneys that are watching this are looking to expand in cryptocurrency, I'll just tell you personally, I am not a big fan of this idea that you create one niche in your work and that's where you live.
Yep.
I think there's a huge risk to do that, because what if something happens and the laws change, and now it's no longer, it's no longer a good market,
Yep.
or there's a recession or what if there's some changes in that, law, like any business. I mean, law is just like any business there is. It's susceptible to ebb and flow. You've got huge ups and downs in the work. You've got and so as a business owner, you've got to learn how to manage that, and look towards balancing that workflow so that you're not reliant on one thing or another. Because if that goes away, then you've got your firm at risk, your income at risk, your staff, all of your employees, your attorneys.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of just saying, okay, I'm just going to go 100% towards blockchain, and that's the only thing I'm going to do.
Yeah. I understand. I think it's smart. I think I think you're right, but I also think that you were right before when you said that you have to get in at ground zero if you want to maximize your muscle in a certain space, and that means drafting. And so I think in order to be in that position, you have to at least put some initial investment of time, energy, and resources, headspace in, like, you can still do a divorce or a will or a whatever, but like I think you have to have 6 books on your desk, and maybe for like 3 months, all those books are about blockchain, and none of them are about revocable living trusts.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah, absolutely. Because what that is that's part of diversifying your practice. It's about adding something to your practice, because I anticipate at some point in the future, we're going to see blockchain brought into the law in a very real way. There's already companies working on it. And what I mean by that is we may see smart wills. Actually, this is one area of law that I would love to see. I would love to see happen. Smart wills. It would really help to eliminate some of the chaos that surrounds wills, whether they're authentic or not, whether someone has lost their original will.
good.
Deeds, I mean, real property law. This is another thing. The fact is that people lose originals. People lose an original will. They'll lose, I mean, how many times has somebody ever moved and you're going, now where was that box? And you never find that box, right?
Yeah.
Ever.
That's genius.
The same
That's
thing
genius.
happens with wills and original deeds, and things like that, contracts that are important, powers of attorney. If those are written in blockchain, and we have seen this, we have seen some movement in real property law around the country, where there is some innovation surrounding deeds, real property deeds. And if those are in blockchain, I mean, anyone who does real property law, we do a ton of it. If you've ever gone to any county and tried to find a certain deed, some counties are easy and some are not.
Yeah.
And I actually have a case right now where a county lost a deed. The county clerk and recorder has no record of it. Like, and it was recorded. We have a number, but it's just gone. Like, where the heck did it go? I mean, it's bizarre. We're hoping, we're doing a lot of work to try to dig into this to see what's happened, and maybe it's there somewhere. We're gonna see what we can do. But that kind of technology and divorce decrees, court decrees.
The
We're
entire
dealing with,
system.
yeah, we've got a case right now where we are trying to go back. Some of the work we do on oil and gas is related to determinations of airships, where we're fixing the chain of title related to minerals. So where minerals haven't been transferred properly throughout the years. We've got a case right now where the records are in the courthouse basement somewhere in a box from 3 generations ago. There was a probate, and nobody can find it because they're in a box somewhere, but they know they're there. We have a court order that says they're there. We have case numbers. We have information relating to it.
Yep.
Right. So if that stuff was written in blockchain and put, and put in the record electronically,
for sure.
Think of the kinds of information that we could use and how the tools we could use. Just from a practical standpoint, I think as a lawyer, think how many lawyers have you met who don't like to use email? Because back when they started practicing law, email was not a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
It's about technology moving and changing. So I don't think it's not all about what opportunities there are for lawyers to expand their practice areas and gain new clients and new work. Some of this is about the technology that's expanding, that's going to allow us to do our job better in some new, really cool, innovative ways.
Can you tell me, like, if LLCs in Wyoming, why they're advantageous? The conventional wisdom that I've always heard is that while there are favorable jurisdictions, it's not advised to forum shop. If you have a business in Minnesota and you're on Main Street in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and you're a barbershop or a dentist or a hair salon or a lawyer, you probably should incorporate in Minnesota because that's where your principal place of business is. Mm-hmm. And that if you don't, you'll have to maintain a registered agent and then pay for that in Wyoming and then have a foreign domestic corporation here. So what, like, if that's true, why does it matter? Like, I understand that Wyoming's friendly and I understand that point, but like, if I have a client here in Minnesota or in Timbuktu, what good does it do me or them to know that, right? Unless they want to go there.
That's where you have to know whether it's advantageous or not, and it's business dependent. It depends on the type of business that it is. It depends on the type of product or service that they're providing. It depends on their business plan and business model. It depends on where people are going to be working, how they're going to be working. It's very, you're right. It's not advisable to just say everybody should do this.
Yeah.
There is no, and that's where I think as lawyers, that's where we come in. We can do the analysis to say that's not advisable. This is what we advise.
Yeah.
That's, you need to be able to understand the law and know it. It is not advisable in all cases. In some cases it is, in some cases it's not. Mm-hmm. It depends on the business.
Super interesting.
Yeah. That's the famous lawyer's answer, right? It depends.
No, that's great. I think that for this question, that's right. To wrap up, what are the biggest, who should you follow if you want to pay attention to this conversation that you mentioned in the last 7 minutes? Developments in the law across the board with blockchain, from real property logs to divorce logs to cool companies doing cool things, and how Wyoming's leading the way. What are some, you mentioned David Pope, who I wrote down.
Yeah, and big shout out to David, if you see this, David. Yeah, he's I really like him. He's doing some cool work. Um, I would I would see about following who to follow. There's some Facebook groups, there's some LinkedIn groups, folks who are very active in talking about this. Um, Probably would call the Wyoming Legislative Service Office and find out if you can get on a notification list related to the work that's being done on these types of laws. I think getting on a notice list is a good place to start
Mhm.
as far as Wyoming goes. And then I would just say contact the people who are on that committee and talk to them. Find out, if there's ways that you can, stay involved or find out what's happening. The other thing I would recommend is there are some organizations in various states that are working on this. So do some research, find out which organizations in your state are working on this, and get involved. Join the group. I mean, so if we're just talking about for an attorney specifically, if we're just talking to attorneys, how do you develop your business? How do you expand your knowledge? How do you grow and looking into new laws and new areas? My
Yes.
number one piece of advice for lawyers is get involved. It's a lot of free time and energy that you're going to put into this. And sometimes it pays out and sometimes it doesn't. But I always see it as a huge benefit because you've increased your knowledge base. Whether you gain clients or not, you personally are learning and growing, and that adds something to your clients, regardless of whether you open up a new practice area or not.
Yep.
So get involved, put in the time, do the research. It is very time consuming to do this. And there's going to be times where you're just going to feel overwhelmed because you're still doing all your normal client work.
Mm-hmm.
But it does take that kind of commitment if you want to be a part of something. And I mean, there's some examples in the cannabis industry. I mean, you could look to the cannabis industry as a perfect example across the country. The attorneys that were on the ground floor advocating, working on the laws, helping to form those laws are the ones that are slammed busy with new cannabis clients.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Because they're super comfortable. They have the entire conversation of the law
Right.
and purpose in their head. Yep.
They know it forward and backward because they were there. They
Yeah.
were there. And they understand it and they can speak that language very comfortably.
Yeah.
So that's an example of an area of law that's been developed over the last few years and is continuing to develop, quite honestly. I mean, that's another area that's just continuing to expand and change um, uh, constantly.
Yeah. Super fascinating. Sweet. Thank you so much, Crystal.
Yeah, we didn't get to the solar part, but we could do that another time.
Maybe another time. This is good. It's I love not knowing things, especially in the technology space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that this is huge. I think that this is huge. I think that cryptocurrency generally is huge, and I think to get on the front side of it in 20 years will be the biggest probably value add to learn it now. I'm gonna do everything for me, for the record. I'm gonna do everything I can to like do my self-taught masters and try and do exactly what you said, is get it on the ground floor in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I think that's the move.
I think that's smart. I mean, right now, personally, I feel like the banking industry is where we're going to see the biggest changes now. That's where we're going to be seeing a lot of the big changes. So learning about banking law so that you understand banking law is going to be a big help in that discussion. And if you want to be a part of that group that is making those laws and changing things for your state, learn and understand banking law. That would be something that I would recommend.
Okay. Will do.
Okay.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Thanks for taking the time.